It's lovely to be here, and just a bit of a background because just in the area in which I work in. So I'm unashamedly a good generalist. So I'm not going to intend to put that space in other ways. We are funded by 3 levels of government as a not-for-profit organisation based in region for the region. We are a network of 7 regional areas in South Australia under an overall chairmanship of Rob Kerrin, but then an individual board underneath my boss at the back, Bill Vanderpeer, but also representative from local government, small business and other areas, including on our board people like Balco and Nearstar, as you would expect in that area. We cover a large, diverse area and we cover a large, diverse activity base. Any day in my life can go from talking about supply chain inputs and blockchain in the abattoir industry through to how it is we deal with reputational change, to tourism and marketing and Main Street facades updates and painting buildings for renewing main streets. That ecosystem continues at that space. We'll intensively assist 300 businesses in this area, and as I walk out here, don't run me down because we've got lots of money to spend, but I'm essentially a client of most of the consultants in this room in some shape or form or the other. Maybe not definitely, maybe it's your industry work, maybe it's your work with Carolyn at GPSA, Tanya at the Clear Valley Winemakers, and it might be work you do with councils and other individual businesses. So I put up there our priorities that we have agreed with the civic leaders, being the Natural Resource Management Board and Legatus. And what's important in this space is you probably won't see large definition changes across particular regions all the time, but you'll see the nuances of what needs to be done coming out in that particular area. In terms of leading with business landscapes, I'm circled out to 3 things, I suppose, to challenge us all, but 3 things that will make a difference in where we are. So our business landscape, as you would expect, is largely driven by agriculture, forest and fishery, but not only. It's diverse in that activity and commonly, as you would expect, made up of almost entirely SMEs. And in that scale, what you'll see on the slideshow there, don't expect you to understand, but I'm looking at 3 private businesses with employees over 200, which means the diversity in the activity. What that means for us in terms of service delivery is of our population of 78, let's say, in terms of the statistics as they change, over 30,000 of them will live in areas that are less than, populations less than 500. So the ability to diversify and change in that area, and I'm really interested in the way in which we represent foreign ownership, the diversity. We are in many ways, and I'm going to talk about the demography and the business landscape in a second because it's a point to come back to, we are living with an ageing population. And we're living with the areas of support. So each year we sit down with our top 60 businesses in the area. We intensively look at what their challenges are. We agglomerate their needs in terms of gas, electricity. We talk about supply chains, buying and those type of activities. But the thing that commonly comes up, the thing that is inescapable in this space is skills and activity. And if a business is not talking to me about the skills that it needs or the skills that it is developing in its staff, then I know that their performance is not at the top end. And it's an area in which I think when I talk to local government and other areas, I see what I won't see in this room here, but the kind of eye glazing. What do you mean? You know, we look at unemployment rates and we think that that indicates where it is. It's absolutely integral that we have that opportunity. It's been a really interesting pipeline project for us as RDAs across the state to essentially provide the pipeline investment and the workforce projections for the recently announced designated area migration agreement. It's critical to us to have skilled people. If you were a fitter, a boiler maker or otherwise, I could have 40 jobs for you tomorrow to choose from within 2 council areas. I know that because I work in the economic development area. That means that I'm there for the good times and the bad. And I'm going to talk about change shortly to bring this all back together because it's actually change and a challenge for you as consultants in how we deal with that in that space. I've put some pipeline of investment figures up there. It is opportunity in that space. We have a number of big investments on the table, most of which in the public domain, some of which are not. And they are significant changes to where we are. Some of the construction jobs themselves will provide the stimulus for our main streets, but we are the echo change in that space. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and I'll move on from this quickly because I actually think that you all have a better sense of this, but it gives you some idea of the volume of the commodity market that leaves our region in terms of grain and other areas, and how intensively important we are in that space, particularly in grain, is the overlay between industries. It's just a quick snapshot. I can pick anything on a thing. I've chosen the tourism industry because it's generally the least controversial in terms of sitting alongside agriculture. But you can see on the 3 areas in which we are involved in and actively involved in tourism in those areas, you can see how many of those common pieces of infrastructure are important for other industries. And that's when you're doing that type of thing, be it Horrocks Highway for the freight activity space, be it the work that we did with South Australian Freight Council and Flinders Ports around the original route assessment of the Yorke Peninsula roads and bringing that together, and the councils. There are multiple users, and when we're feeding in multiple users, we're getting the best return on investment in that space. Strzelecki Track is as important for tourism as it is for agriculture in that the area is mining in that area, and it is those common user benefits that drive us to think that the change and that those realisation of those pipeline investment that we talked about beforehand. And you'll see the councils will have me put in jetties so we can all go fishing, and it's really important. Now, I talk about this because I have a background in the legal industry, working and clerking in Port Lincoln in fishing and maritime law. I'm from a mixed grazing place in the southeast, and to my detriment, own a non-commercial vineyard, and which is what you do when you fall in love with a winemaker. And that gives me a unique insight into a few different areas of the area and what is important. And again, I come back to this. In terms of this, Yorke Mid-North is a good space in here. We do a lot of work with the Regional Australian Institute on Jobs of the Future, what it looks like, how we instigate our training from our office as we do career connections. So we work with people who are coming into the workplace and coming out of the workplace, but we also train in a number of areas. Our demographic rating, we are living 15 years into the future in regional South Australia in terms of our ageing population, and it's an opportunity as much as a challenge, but I think we need to understand how it is that we maintain those activities. And I think that it permeates everything we do, and as I mentioned thereafter, it's great when the timer stops though. Good. So, it's population and how that sits together, and I challenge us to think about this activity. This is the best job in the world. I'm pretty sure that I'm lucky enough to work with 300 businesses who do some incredible stuff, and I'm lucky enough to deep dive into them, into activities, and to work with all those other activity areas. All of those businesses are struggling with the geographical location they are in terms of population. Either they can't get enough or they've got too many, and it affects their productivity in a way that is incredibly important. But the other thing I want to talk about is change. So, with the best job in the world, you have a brutal hour. So yesterday morning, I had one of those brutal hours. Big announcement in the region, 5 text messages for people who didn't know, a text message because someone left an eye out of someone, the media release on their name, significant activities in that space. And I had an opportunity last night to sit down after one of those really good days where there'd been lots of economic development put into the region and think this is because change is hard. So as consultants, if it isn't that you are working, and if you're working with an industry body or otherwise, you need to think about how we put into the context what change means for regional businesses. So every time a retail shop closes, or they worry about how it is that the target closures across regional South Australia change, it challenges us to think about what ecosystem these agribusinesses are going to live in. And it is full of opportunity. I'm not downcast in that way, but I think that it's important as consultants, largely in the room from the list I've seen, that if I was to ask one thing of you in the jobs that come before me, either with your individual businesses or industry associations, had a little bit in there about how we're going to manage the change that this impacts. How is it that this is going to go out into the marketplace to say, I'm going to need to reduce my staff in this area but increase them in this area? I need higher skills. How is it that the change is going to be managed in terms of skills and training? How is it that we're going to manage the uplift in this area when I'm going to bring in migrants into the area? How are we going to settle them? How are we going to make them happy into the population? How are we going to do that? Because all of these things, it's easy to talk about. I love it when I'm talking input-output modelling about growth in an industry and what it means and talking about that kind of stuff. But that's the top edge. It's exciting, it's activity. It's how we implement, that is the things and the communities that implement that best, the civic leaders that are able to understand that and how we bring that together. So I like Carolyn change because I had one of those days. But also, I thought it's important to say that there are very few places where you get all three levels of government sitting together. So competitive neutrality in what I do is, I have a terrible saying that's like dating 13 different people. And I was never that good at dating to start off with. But it is true that when it works, it really works. So we talk about incubators, we talk about bringing it together, we talk about bringing the three levels together. Because we have industry and competitive neutrality, it's really important to think about how the ecosystem works in that way. So I'm delighted to be here. I think I'm going to learn more from you today than you're going to learn from me. But if I could if I could see that came through, that everything that we did in that space, be it individual businesses and elsewhere, indicated what it's going to mean for the supply chain in terms of population and staff, and how it is that change is going to be managed either in the business or at the industry level, I think we can get a lot more out of where we go into the future. So I'm 1 minute short.